So our first featured speaker today is a longtime friend of CII's and a former Dunn Award winner. Many of you know Bud Ahearn. I normally don't read entire bios of folks, but Bud is quite an impressive individual, great man, and I'm going to do that because I think it kind of gives justice to who he is. Bud pursued his first career in the United States Air Force, rising to the rank of Major General during years devoted to space and nuclear missile program management, construction program management, special operations, and directing all financial programs for the Air Force Civil Engineering Group. He commanded a combat engineering squadron during the Vietnam War, and he retired as the Air Force Civil Engineer. In civilian life, Bud has worked at CH2M HILL, advancing through many positions and holding firm-wide responsibilities for strategic planning, governmental affairs, strategic communications, and something near and dear to his heart, leadership development. Ultimately, Bud became the company's vice chairman of the board. In semi-retirement since 2011, I don't know about that, he divides his time between consulting with CH2M HILL and serving as an active member of the National Academy of Engineers, the National Academy of Construction, the American Society of Civil Engineers, and the Society of Military Engineers. He also helped found Engineers Without Borders. Bud holds a BS in Civil Engineering from Notre Dame and a Master's in Public Policy from Syracuse. And again, he was last year's Carroll Dunn Award winner. So Bud's speech is entitled Ingenuity, The Journey to Extraordinary. So please help me welcome Bud Ahearn.
Thank you, Keith. Spreading a little bit of learning baloney with this introduction here. I couldn't be more proud to be among you tonight, this afternoon, let's say. And before I get started, Rebecca, roll tide, huh? Just fantastic to have you recognized as an award winner, and Eric, the Ramblin' Wreck. We're going to build this profession on the shoulders of folks just like you. And of course, that's what brings us here today. And thank you, Keith, for your warm welcome. I couldn't be more grateful for the honor expressed in yours and Wayne's invitation to address this group. Our spirit was just reflected in Rebecca and Eric. We may, notwithstanding our age, we're young and vibrant. And you can tell that from the dynamics of all the breakout sessions that we've had, and we're self-reliant and resilient. We can bounce back. We're learning and aspiring, and at times even defiant as we show our teeth and work hard at creating the best places to live and to learn and to work and to play for America and for the planet. Historians and scholars and governments are tracking us in our industry as we build a body of works that ignites many a soul with a commitment to the journey of moving from good to excellent and to extraordinary. And the purposefulness, of course, about what CII is all about, research and best practices. When we look at that, by the way, we must arrive at the conclusion that CII is investment quality. Its potential is there to enrich and drive significant dividends for all of our stakeholders. CII, with great respect, we're standing on the shoulders of those who have gone before. But we're not here about history. We're here about living out our imagination. We're here about making new news, new productive stride, new competition. Our industry is, our history is rich with achievement. Yet there are screaming calls for more from us, for better service, for more productivity, to serve the political, the social, the economic, the technology, and the security needs of our nation and the nations with whom we are allied. They're screaming for more from us. And I can't help but believe that the agenda this past couple of days, with heavy emphasis on implementation of that which we have studied and brought to publication in our best practices, they're screaming for the implementation of that fine work. Background gives reason to why the title Ingenuity, and why the notion about living out our imagination with the intent of getting ourselves to extraordinary. There's real work in that journey, extraordinary work. And I thought maybe we would look at the idea of making a choice. And I'll show you and talk to a model for just a moment about making a choice to move through the journey from good to excellent to extraordinary. It's called the abundance model, and it's based on a huge amount of scholarship in the Organizational Development Center called the Center for Positive Organizational Scholarship, University of Michigan's Ross Business School. I thought we would look at ingenuity and leadership in the context of our vocabulary in our industry. And I thought also we might look a little more deeply into how we might go about building an extraordinary organization. And we'll use a couple of models that have been proven for 450 years to help us with that, reaching back and then looking forward through the world of humanities. So that would be a quick overview of what we're going to speak about this afternoon. The abundance model, making a choice, creates a model of a normal distribution. And the vast amount of the population is embedded in the norm. And very few are ill in the context of the distribution, and very few are extraordinary. Very few are broken. But the central tendency of both management and engineering is to look at that which is broken and want to fix it. And so we spend the vast majority of our time, and let me give you an example. In the world of physical health, the medical world spends 95% of its research money on how to get folks from ill to healthy. They spend very little time getting the knowledge base that what it takes from us as whole people to get to Olympic fitness, where we bring to the game every day the full pack of energy that we're able to create. Very, very little. There's a wellness program that's been going on for a long, long while, which is a step forward, but in terms of hardcore data about best practices to get Olympic fit, where we're operating optimally, very little. In the world of mental health, 99.5% of the research money is designed to fix the broken, rather than to move you and all of us into the flow. I trust you know what the flow is all about. You've been there before. I know, where you've really become engaged in a project where you lose the sense of place and time, where you lose the sense and the need for food and shelter, and you just are doing the very best work you've ever done before. Now, you don't know how you got there, other than the exciting moment and the challenge of the program, nor do mental health folks know how you go to that place called the flow. There's some work being done on that particular subject, but little. And so the idea is we have a choice. We can work from in the center of the normal distribution. We can spend a high degree of our time working to the left, fixing the broken, or we can decide to take the journey from good to excellent to extraordinary. I mentioned that to you because it's simply a choice. And by the way, it's connected to implementing all the best practices that we have. The idea scholarship also is very valuable in this particular decision. And let me tee this one up. There's a fellow named Robert Quinn. Robert Quinn is a Mormon fellow from Brigham Young, a PhD. He works in two positions. One of them, he's a very, very active Mormon bishop. He just got back from 4 years in Australia with about 500 young missionaries. But he's also a renowned coach to generals and admirals and to senior officials in Washington, D.C. He's a professor at the University of Michigan. And he talks about building the bridge as you walk on it. And he recognizes the human side of the play of all of us. And that is, it's defined by one, self-centeredness. Secondly, it's defined by comfort. Thirdly, it's defined by being closed. And fourthly, it's being defined by external drivers, like teenagers, what everybody's doing, like industry, following industry trends rather than breaking glass and making new pathways for the notion. He argues that humankind resists change because they haven't made a clear choice of moving from self-centeredness, which is defined as, in first instance, self-survival, a newborn with mother, self-sufficiency, skill building, self-esteem and confidence building, and this notion of self-absorption, and then there's this thing called raw, ugly selfishness. Now we have a choice, is that we can continue that ride or we can transform ourselves to being others-centered rather than self-centered. It's a very clear choice. And that's the first element that Robert Quinn argues really needs a clear definition and a clear change of stance. The second one is about comfort. Now, leadership and ingenuity is hardly comfortable. It's walking naked and alone down the pathways of uncertainty, people wetting on your boots every step of the way, and you're buoyed by the power of your vision. The third element that he speaks about, and it's pretty profound, is this business about being closed. How is it that we get so enslaved by structure, processes, and tools without being able to see the advantages of advanced practices, advanced processes? So we get, there's a lot of that ongoing in our particular profession. The idea of being closed is to shut down, and particularly for the young millennials and the young aspiring people, you shut down and they're going to walk for us, from us. There's no doubt about it. They want to engage, they want to contribute, and we ought not now shut them down, but we ought to open and embrace new ideas and teach them how to live with it, as it were, if you can't embrace their idea at the moment. But there's an organizational discipline involved in that. The last element that Quinn talks about is pretty powerful, is moving from being externally directed to being internally directed. And he uses Martin Luther King and Gandhi, the Nelson Mandela type Christ in the context of how one becomes a character of purpose and capabilities. And not influenced by the externals. So I mention this to you because if we make the transition from self-centeredness and loosen ourselves from the bounds of comfort and open our arms to embrace others and get after this notion of being self-determinant with a strong character and a strong purpose, we make a lot of really good strides. I highlight these folks because they are really worth, Robert Quinn and the Center for Positive Organizational Scholarship, a deep dive into your organization. Let me speak a little bit about this notion of, and talk a little bit about leadership and ingenuity. You know, there are 1,000,001 definitions of leadership. And even more books than definitions, I think, on the subject of leadership, because leadership is so situational. But there's also a new science. And the researchers and the scholars and the practitioners, the pragmatists, have come together to do some wonderful work on this particular subject. I happened, for the sake of this discussion, crafted a definition, and I offer it only as a framework for the discussion as we move the CII agenda forward. And I think it's the art of influence, leadership. I think it's a positive human force multiplier. I think it's a way of systems thinking and advocacy. And I think its purpose is to realize the promise of technology and the motive power of management. Said another way, I think leadership has far more potential and capacity embedded in it than the promise of technology or the science of management. I trust your experience would validate that, but it would be worthy of a good dive to determine that. Ingenuity, on the other hand, is situational awareness, flexibility, commitment to get stuff done. I really like the word ingenuity, really like it. By the way, it's the root of the word engineer, the root of the word engineer construction. And the idea there is ingenuity is a very special aptitude reflecting both the bright intellect and the pluck to clear hurdles. But there's more. Ingenious folks use this aptitude for discovering, for inventing, for designing, for building. And why these committed souls do that kind of creative work, they do some other things. They even design and implement rigorous in structure, processes, and tools for best practices. Ingenuity works across the full spectrum of change. These folks are marked for their originality. These folks are marked for their resourcefulness, for their flexibility, and yet they strongly endorse rigor and control as a means to deliver extraordinary projects. So there's some of you have perhaps studied